The 539th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you live on a Saturday afternoon. And we've got quite a bit of news to talk about with some developments in the portal within the last, 12, 18, 24 hours or so. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about a guy that we just learned about an hour ago will be on campus and be the first official visit for Carolina this transfer portal season. We'll talk about the big man that Carolina got involved with last night, who comes out of the Patriot League, and then just some other developments with some other guys that Carolina has been involved with. One guy has already found his new home. It will not be Chapel Hill, and another guy is trending towards going somewhere else other than UNC. We'll talk about that as well. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Carolina great Tyler Hansbrough for that pod thought. That thought is, quote, "In basketball or in life, earn everything. Have a great work ethic and prepare to be great. When I was growing up, you worked harder and earned those achievements. Show respect, be on time, and don't expect anyone to give you anything," end quote. I do think what Carolina is looking for in the portal are players that have great work ethics and guys that have a desire to be great. And it's not to say that the guys that Carolina had this past year didn't have those same desires, but Carolina had that 2 years ago, and that culture really bonded that group, and it really drove that group to all the success that that group was able to have in the regular season and the postseason. I think it's what Hubert Davis is wanting to find this offseason are guys that are self-motivators and guys that, yes, you have to coach them, you have to push them, but these are guys that are showing up to the gym early, staying in the gym late, and doing what you got to do to become a great basketball player at Carolina. And that's not an easy thing to do because there have been a lot of greats that played here, so the bar is set so high, but if you aspire to reach that, and if you put in the work to do that, then the sky is the limit. So a great pod thought there for Tyler Hansbrough, who has really come into his own, I think, as a member of the media. He's gotten more comfortable calling games on the radio with Jones Angel. He's got a pretty good headspace with the Field of 68, where he delivers a lot of, I think, great opinions and such. So we could be getting more thoughts from him in the future. Let's not waste any time, though. Let's go ahead and get to the news that just broke about an hour or so ago. We were about to go live, literally, when this news came down from inside Carolina. And according to them, San Diego State transfer guard Nick Boyd will be in Chapel Hill today for an official visit, becoming the first Tar Heel transfer target to visit Chapel Hill this offseason. Of course, we know him a lot better than you probably would have initially because, well, Carolina played Nick Boyd and San Diego State back in the first four in Carolina's blowout win over the Aztecs as they moved into the first round of the NCAA tournament. Last year, he averaged 13.4 points per game, 3.9 rebounds, 3.9 assists, while shooting 41% from the field and 35% from three. For his career, he's played 119 games across 2 different schools. He has started 82 of them, and his career averages are 9.4 points, 3.4 rebounds, 2.5 assists on 42% shooting from the field, 37% shooting from behind the arc. Before his lone season with the Aztecs, he did play his previous 3 years at Florida Atlantic, started 37 games for that team that made their historic run to the Final Four as a 9 seed back in 2023. So he has starting experience and has played on the biggest stage that college basketball has to offer. And I mentioned that Carolina played against him in the first four. And he struggled in that game, scoring 12 points, was just 4 of 14 from the field and 2 of 8 from behind the 3-point line. This is a guy that Carolina's kind of worked quietly with because not only did we not know that he was, being recruited by Carolina, we did not have any inclination that he was going to be on campus as early as today. But that's the reality of the situation. Carolina looks to have 2 guard spots to fill right now. RJ Davis is off to graduation. Elliot Cadeau is off in the transfer portal. There could be a 3rd guard spot that opens depending on what Ian Jackson has, what he decides to do, whether he decides to come back, transfer, or go pro. What do you make of Carolina dipping back down into the mid-major level, but getting involved with San Diego State transfer Nick Boyd?
Yeah, they're looking for a scoring guard. I think that's what it continues to prove to you, that they need that guy that can take over for RJ Davis, and they're looking desperately for that player. It started with Donovan Dent. It went to Nick Dorn, and now Nick Boyd is the next guy that Carolina is looking at as well. This is – I know people are probably going to be asking themselves, why is Carolina doing this? Especially after the performance that he had against Carolina in the first four. I think there were some people that will probably be very critical of that performance, although he was really one of the only guys that was doing anything on the offensive end of the floor for San Diego State in that game, if you want to take something away. So, look, I think there's things to like about his game. I think that he does a really good job of creating on his own, does a really good job of being involved in the pick and roll action. That's how he scores a lot of his baskets, which is something that Carolina, we've seen them utilize that a lot over the years, and especially under Hubert Davis. That's been a sticking point. When Carolina has been able to set those high ball screens and get to the basket, that's been an area where they've shined. That's what Nick Boyd is able to do. He shoots the ball pretty well from beyond the arc, 35%. Not bad, especially for a guy that took 148 of them this past year. The thing with him is you're just looking at the consistency. There's areas where, he's been up and down. He's steadily grown as his career has gone along. But you do see some games where, if you go back through the season, you do see a decent amount of single-digit scoring games for him, some rough shooting nights, a lot of 1-4 whatevers. So that's certainly something that I think Carolina would want to figure out what's going on there, maybe get a little more consistency from him in his senior year. But I think it's just Carolina taking shots to try to find guys that can score the ball and fit what they need right now. And I think he certainly is able to do that. He shares the basketball well as well. Not nearly as well as Elliot Cadeau did, but here's the thing. You moved on from Elliot Cadeau for a reason, because his turnovers were just too much for you. Not a guy that turns the ball over a whole lot, just 1.8 per game. But still, I think shares the basketball pretty well. So I think this kind of checks a lot of boxes for Carolina. Is it a guy that's going to come in here and just absolutely take over? And a guy that we think is going to be, an all ACC caliber player? Probably not. That's why you're hoping he wouldn't be the headliner. But I do think that this is a legitimate target for Carolina in the portal, and is one that would be a nice addition, especially if you can add a couple of other pieces around him.
Yeah, I think one thing you got to like is, and we've talked about this with every guy that Carolina has gotten involved with so far in this portal cycle, you like the size. He's 6'3", so you're getting bigger in the backcourt, which Hubert Davis basically mandated was going to be a big focus, a big priority for what Carolina does this offseason in the portal, is just adding more size and length across the roster from top to bottom. They're maybe not be as big as what Duke is this year, but just trying to have legitimate size, something they did not have both in the backcourt and the front court. And the experience, I think, is invaluable. Being able to add a guy that's got 119 games played, 82 starts under his belt. You're still living in a day and age where older teams are winning and winning at a high level this time of the year. Like, yeah, Duke's still playing, and they're going to vie for a spot in the Elite or in the Final Four later tonight. But you look at all the other teams that are still standing. You look at an Auburn. You look at what Florida has. These guys are old. You look at Florida's case, their roster, I think, is just as old, if not older, than what Oklahoma City's roster is in the NBA. So if you can add a guy that has got that type of experience, and I do think, yeah, it's from the mid-major level, but that's still that's still valuable. And the biggest thing is that you got to trust and believe in your system, that in the way that you do things, he'll be a much more efficient player. Like, could he shoot 47, 48% from the field? Can he get that three-point shooting percentage up to 37, 38%, where you saw it really be for RJ Davis when he was playing at a high level? And so, our good friend Myron Goodman, who's shows us a lot of support, chimed in, and this is something that was going to be, I think, a concern for the fan base. Getting kids on campus is great. I am just not sure this is the level of point guard UNC needs to reach out to what is expected. He then followed up and said, since McNeely seems out of reach, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. I understand it, but UNC needs to be bringing in a higher level player. Well, to his defense, he was an all-conference player this past season in the Mountain West. So, where Carolina showed interest in Donovan Dent, he was the Mountain West Player of the Year. Nick Boyd was an all-Mountain West member. So it's not like this guy who has a lot of production that wasn't warranted, that did not come with some recognition. I understand the initial pushback. I understand the initial, are we really going back to the mid-major level to bring someone into your program? But, this is a guy that is an experienced guard that's played on the biggest stage in college basketball and was an all-conference member from a mid-major conference that we regard as the best mid-major conference in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you could just watch the way that he played even in the game against Carolina, an uber confident type of player too, which is something that I think Carolina wants, especially after, Elliot Cadeau struggled in that area. And I mean, yeah, the stats are there. I mean, he's grown every single year. So you would imagine that if he gets with a power conference team, he has the chance to grow even more this year. In terms of the big names, I mean, my question is, who are the big names that Carolina hasn't reached out to and offered? They offered Donovan Dent. Are you looking at a guy like maybe Miles Rice, the transfer from Indiana? Because he took a significant step back this year when he was with the Hoosiers, as opposed to the year before when he played with Washington State. Now, maybe you're wanting to take a risk on that, but that's also a guy that doesn't shoot the ball really that well from beyond the arc. He doesn't share the ball nearly as well as Nick Boyd does. So I think that's the thing, is that, again, it's still kind of early in the portal cycle. And, Isaac McNeely, first of all, McNeely is, a guard that can score it, but he's a very specific type of scorer. And I think that Carolina, they're looking for someone that can score it out of the one spot. I think that's what they're looking for, is a scoring point guard. And that's not what Isaac McNeely is. We'll talk about him a little bit more here, when we talk about him and Donovan Dent. But they want guys in the backcourt that can score it at will. Again, he's the only guy at his position that's really entered the transfer portal. We haven't seen a great scoring two guard outside of McNeely that's entered the portal yet. that Carolina can reach out to that's not a mid-major. We've seen some mid-major guys that have, potentially, entered the portal. I think there's a few of them that are, not only have they entered the portal, but they're also entering the NBA draft that Carolina could certainly look at. One of the transfers I know out of Monmouth, that's certainly one that Carolina, would have connections to with King Rice. But I mean, it's just hard to think of a lot of other guys that have entered. The only other one that comes to mind for me is Pop Isaacs, who is a good player. Really liked him at Texas Tech, but he's coming off a severe injury. So, I mean, those are the types of guys that I would think maybe eventually you'd want to see Carolina get involved with. But I mean, how much better are we thinking that these guys are than Nick Boyd? I think Boyd is a guy that just continues to grow. And, there's a chance that him, being with Carolina, being around better talent, this is an area that he could thrive this season. So I get the concern that it's mid-major guys, but again, you're right. We're talking about the best mid-major conference out there. And frankly, it's not even close. I mean, they put 4 or 5 teams in the NCAA tournament each and every year. This is a guy that was a starter for a team that made it to the Final Four. And had success there. And also, was a key contributor last year for a Florida Atlantic team that made the NCAA tournament, was a key contributor this year for a San Diego State team that made the NCAA tournament. I think that those are things that you have to talk about when it comes to him. And it's a reason why I'm not really bothered that Carolina is going after him. Where I would get bothered is if this is your headliner, just like we talked about with Nick Dorn. If those guys are the ones that are the big gets for you, okay, yeah, then you can be a little bit concerned and you could be a little bit angry. But we're still early in this portal cycle. And the fact that Carolina is talking to these guys and getting them on campus, certainly not a bad thing, especially since people were saying just earlier today, this morning, complaining that Carolina has done nothing so far in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and look, I think you still got to remember there are 8 teams that are still playing. Guys from those rosters are going to enter the portal once their season comes to an end. So there is still an opportunity for those high-caliber guards, if you will, to enter the portal. Of course, the name that sent shockwaves throughout the sport was R.J. Lewis, the Big East Player of the Year, him entering the portal, but also going through the NBA draft process. The thing you got to worry about with him is what is he going to demand NIL-wise? As someone that is the reigning Big East Player of the Year, that might be a guy that's looking to, if he stays in college, to make, $2+ million a year. And so, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to fill out your roster and how you're going to spend money, there might be a situation where he might just be too costly for how much Carolina has to add to the roster. I think this is what you've got to like about Carolina. And this is where having Jim Tanner in place and where you not playing this deep in the tournament helps you is it allows you to do your due diligence. And so where last year Carolina was behind the 8 ball getting involved with prospects, basically Carolina's making sure they've just got their hands in on virtually every prospect that could make sense. Understanding you're not going to bring every single one of them into your program because it's not possible to do so, but that way you're at least not having to come from behind to try to get guys into your program as your scholarships open up where, you've got 2 already that maybe a third opens up with Ian Jackson. Well, guess what? You're already in conversations with 3 or 4 guys that could potentially come to your program and be a part of what you want to do next season. So, I think you look at the experience, the production, you put him in your system, you get some more efficiency out of him. This could be a guy that could be a nice solid addition to the roster for next season. Now let's get to the guy that we were going to talk about primarily on this edition of the show. That's really, I think, going to garner a lot of, I think, negative energy around the potential recruitment of him. Yesterday, Tipton Edits reported that Carolina has reached out to Bucknell transfer Noah Williamson. Noah Williamson is a 7-foot center who played at Bucknell and has been a tremendous player at the Patriot League level, a one big conference into the NCAA tournament. He was named the 2024-2025 Patriot League Player of the Year. He's been named to the All-Patriot League team twice, was named to the All-Patriot Tournament team twice, and has been a member of the All-Patriot League defensive team as well. This past year, he averaged 17.6 points per game, 7.6 rebounds, shot 50 while shooting 53% from the field, and just over 32% from behind the three-point line. For his career, he's played in 81 games. He's a 12.1 per game scorer with 5.8 rebounds, while he shoots 52% from the field and 32% from behind the three-point line. Production is there. You got to like the fact that it's 2 years where he's been a primary player for Bucknell. He's been an all-conference player both years at the Patriot League. The 7-foot thing is now you're adding size that you did not have a year ago. He's not a stretch big. He's not going to step out and shoot the three ball very well, but his ability to rebound is something that Carolina lacked this past year as well. But on the flip side comes the fact that not only is he coming potentially from the mid-major level, you're talking about the Patriot League, which is one of the lower level conferences in college basketball. There have been times they've put quality teams in the field. A few years ago when Colgate was winning the league, they were a trendy pick to pull a first-round upset. This past year, American won the Patriot League. American played in Dayton, and they were having to play their way into the NCAA tournament, something they failed to do, losing to Mount St. Mary. So, this is one that we knew right away that this interest was going to garner negative energy around it. That did not fail to deliver. When you go back and read the comments on the article, whether you go in all the Facebook groups or some of the initial feedback on Twitter, when you look at Carolina's interest in Noah Williamson, what do you make of a guy that there's no denying that he's proven he can play, but we don't know how his game would translate to the ACC level?
Yeah, I mean, look, I watched the film of him that they put up whenever guys go into the portal. I forget what the actual name of the YouTube channel is, but they do a great job of this each and every year now. And I mean, look, there were some things that you could be impressed by. I thought that, he has a pretty solid back to the basket game. But just looking at his frame, that really is concerning to me. I get that he has the size, but I just don't know if he's a guy that's going to be able to handle the physicality of this league. And that's the biggest concern when you get guys like this. This feels a lot like Paxton Wojcik, where you're getting a guy that's coming from a lower league in the mid-majors. The Ivy League certainly has, had their success in the NCAA tournament. I think that was one of the big concerns when you were going after a guy like Danny Wolf. And that would be the reason why maybe you do take on a player like this. The other thing that's concerning, though, to me about him, and one of the reasons why you maybe end up staying away from him, is this is a guy that rebounding-wise wasn't necessarily great. You're looking for a guy that can really take over on the glass out of that 5 spot. And this is a guy who averaged 7.6 rebounds per game. And again, that's at the Patriot League level. What does that translate to when he gets to the ACC level? Does it? Because if it doesn't, then Carolina once again is having to rely on whoever's playing the 4, whether it's Caleb Wilson or somebody else, Vin Allen Lubin, however you want to situate that lineup. And then, you're relying on the rest of your group to also find a way to supplement the rebounding. We saw how this year, not having the rebounding presence that you've had in years past really hurt Carolina. You've got to get back to having that type of rebounding presence. And another thing that's kind of concerning about him is the number of turnovers that he has per game. He averages 2.8 turnovers per game. And, at the mid-major level, that's something that really sticks out because Carolina needs guys that are going to be able to hold on to the basketball. One of the things that I noticed about him a lot was he does carry the ball low, and that's one of your big sticking points with guys. You were watching, I believe it was Carson Cooper last night, who had a nice lay-in the game for Michigan State against Ole Miss. And he said that's what you want to see are guys that don't bring the ball down, that keep that ball high. He definitely does bring the ball down, and that's part of the reason why he turns the ball over the way that he does. The one thing that he does bring is the ability to stretch the floor. He shoots the ball a pretty decent amount there from the outside. Shot it at a 32%. We'll give to him because we'll round it up. 32% clip this year, which isn't bad. I certainly think that's something that Carolina values. But yeah, this is one of those guys where, look, if Carolina is willing to take it on, I get it. It's one of those projects that you're willing to take on, but that more than likely means that you're going to be playing with Vin Allen Lubin as your main starter at the 5 position. And this is going to be the guy that can come off the bench and sort of help. Sometimes you might play 2 bigs on the floor, but this is not a guy that I think you're bringing in here and hoping that he is your starter unless he can really prove it to you in the offseason. So, I think Carolina had to do it because right now this is the best big in the portal and they need someone at that spot. But I don't think that this is what you're hoping for as the solution. You're really praying that there is a bigger name that enters the portal here over the next week or so that you can jump on and potentially offer some big money to get to Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I think this is Carolina doing its due diligence because, quite frankly, outside of Magoon Guath, the big man from San Diego State, there's not a big man in the portal that makes a whole lot of sense for Carolina to go after. This guy enters, there's production there. There's obviously skill and talent and ability, but you understand that if you bring him in, there's going to be an adjustment period. There's going to be an acclimation period that, as we've seen with Kay Tyson, with other guys from the mid-major level, sometimes those dudes just never acclimate to the level of talent they play against night in, night out, the physicality you play against night in, night out, which means that Carolina, I think, if they would never put this message out there, but internally, man, they're waiting and hoping for much more for a big man from the power conference level to go portaling. And you do expect that to happen. Mm-hmm. It's kind of odd that there are 1,000 players in the portal and there isn't this big man that makes a whole lot of sense for Carolina to go after, but that quite literally right now is the reality of the situation. Maybe that changes with, Arkansas season just coming to an end. Maybe when they get back and have their end of season meetings, a big man on their roster wants to go somewhere else. Maybe a big man that's still playing this weekend, their season comes to an end. They want to go and test the waters basically in free agency, and Carolina can get involved with them, but you can't bank on that. And so you can't get caught to where if that doesn't happen, if this is more of a guard-centric transfer portal as opposed to a big man transfer portal, well, then you still got to bring a big man in because you don't have a big man coming in your recruiting class. I think James Brown in his second year, a full year in the program, a full offseason in the program, might be ready to contribute, but you can't ask him to become a guy that goes from not playing at all his freshman year to playing, 14, 18 minutes a night and being your second big man off the bench. This is, I think, where not knowing the status around Zayden High really makes things frustrating. Because if Carolina's open to bringing Zayden High back, I don't know if they go bring a big man in or not. Or if they are bringing someone in, maybe it makes a lot more sense to go bring in a Noah Williamson because you've got a guy that you've recruited to play at this level. You saw in his freshman year, man, that there's talent there, there's ability that's there, but of course he's not with the program this year, and we don't know what his status is right now moving forward. So, I understand why Carolina fans would push back on this, but my argument is what else do you want them to do? Mm-hmm. Because if they weren't trying to go get a big man, you'd be sitting here complaining. They're going after the big man that are available in the portal to them right now. And until someone else changes, they may be stuck having to offer a lower level conference big man and hope that they can coach him up and make him a productive player at the ACC level.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger name that I've seen, and this one I think is relatively recent. I did not see this one last night, would be Flory Badunga, the big man from Kansas who was a backup this year. I mean, 6'9", so he doesn't have the size that everybody is really wanting. But, I mean, 5.4 rebounds in just 16 minutes per game is really pretty solid. But until you start to see those other big names enter the portal, I don't feel like Carolina has many options, because you're right. Zayden High is the biggest question mark here. What does he end up doing? Because if he ends up coming back, and you also have to figure out where are you going to play him. He's a guy that, that looked like they were trying to play him a little bit more on the perimeter and more at that 4 spot with what we saw in the scrimmages than what he did his freshman year. So is that the plan? Is that the plan, to play him more as a 4, or are they looking to play him at the 5 spot? I think that's a key thing that Carolina fans are probably forgetting about. I don't know when that meeting has taken place. I think someone told me that meeting took place earlier this week. And hopefully they have some sort of clarity on that. But yeah, until there is a big name that enters the portal that Carolina doesn't take a chance on, and maybe that's Badunga. That's a guy that I actually really liked in some of the limited minutes that he had at Kansas. Would not mind Carolina going after him at all. But I think until they end up not going after one of these big names, you have to just remain calm, wait for one of the bigger names to enter, because yes, right now, this is pretty much a guard-centric portal. Most of the guys that have entered the portal, and it makes sense. I mean, a lot of the teams that we've seen that have, some of the better big men, they are still alive. They're still fighting. And, the thing is that, the teams that exited last night, I mean, it's going to take them time before their guys are going to officially make their decisions on whether or not they are going to transfer. So that's the other thing. This is something that we have to slow play. Again, if we get back here in a week and Carolina still is not looking for big men, the only guy that they've been in contact with is Williamson, then we can have a conversation about how concerned should you honestly be. But I feel like we saw last year that the bigs, it was later on in the portal window where they started to enter. A lot of the guys early were big-time guards that wanted to get into the portal, that wanted to get as much money as they possibly could, and then the big men entered to see what money was left. I feel like we're probably going to have a similar trend this time around, and hopefully Carolina is able to take advantage of it when some of those big names do enter.
Yeah, Badunga is a guy I think I would like to see Carolina get interested, get involved with. A raw player, but a guy that, I thought just a physical big, I thought could be really effective as a screener, a guy that could get to the rim and score. And Carolina, I think, needs that. They struggled really mightily to finish around the rim and some of the close losses they had a year ago. So we'll have to monitor that situation. One thing to remember is Kansas does visit Carolina this upcoming non-conference season. So if Carolina were to go after them, he would be facing his old teammates in a non-conference showdown in November or December of next year. Let's now get to just the other stuff around the portal that Carolina has been involved with. We got a comment here from our guy Big Saw on YouTube. He said Dent committed to UCLA. That, of course, is Donovan Dent, the guy, the all Mountain West player of the year from New Mexico. That look, we said initially Carolina was going to have their hands full with trying to get him, just because every power conference school in the country was going to be after him. Carolina was interested. Duke was interested. There was a chance he would have gone to Xavier to follow his head coach. But he ends up staying on the West Coast. UCLA, I think, kind of surprised me just because I didn't really kind of think about the Bruins as a potential landing spot for him, mainly because who knew what Mick Cronin was going to do as their head coach? With the way that guy talked during the season, I would have thought he was, leaving for Villanova. But that appears to be what Kevin Willard is going to do, the Maryland head coach. But nonetheless, he lands at he lands at UCLA. And then we've kind of talked around this and about this in the last two editions of the podcast. But Isaac McNeely, from all the initial intel, Carolina is third in the running for him. He appears to be on his way to play for Pat Kelsey and Louisville. Is this concerning that the first two, I guess, real transfer portal targets in the backcourt that Carolina has gone after, one is already committed somewhere else, and the other, who's from the ACC, appears to be headed to another school within the conference, but not being Carolina?
I mean, a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you. It definitely is something that is noteworthy because Carolina is such a big brand. You would imagine that they would have gotten more involved with those guys. Although they were involved early with Isaac McNeely, you would have liked to see them at least get him on campus. I think that's the thing that if you're concerned about Carolina not landing these guys, that's the thing that you're concerned about, is that you didn't even get these guys on campus. Now, Donovan Dent, he didn't visit any campus. UCLA was, I heard that rumor, I think it was on Thursday that someone sent me that rumor and started drumming that up, that it was pretty much a done deal. He was going to UCLA. So that's a guy to me that entered the portal. He knew where he wanted to go. And once he got the confirmation that they were open to bringing him in, he was going to take that opportunity. It is a little weird because, the thing with Mick Cronin, we didn't know what his status would be. I think now it's almost certain he is going to be back with them because we thought Villanova would be the place that would be trying to get him if he was to leave UCLA. They are not. It appears that they have locked their eyes on a guy in Kevin Willard, who just exited the tournament earlier this week. So that looks like that's going to be the move for them. So I think, that one doesn't necessarily concern me. I do think that, one thing that you like about the fact that he's going to UCLA is there were some rumblings of the teams that were involved with him, and they included Kentucky, which is not necessarily as bad as, it could be, but still a rival and a team that's another blue blood, and Duke. That's the one that I think would have been the most concerning, was that Duke was after him pretty heavy. They wanted a guy who could be ball dominant and score the ball. And Carolina, that would have been a little bit more concerning for Carolina if they wouldn't have been able to land him over Duke, a team that seems to be more focused on bringing in their most talented guys from the high school ranks and then just filling some of the other needs with the guys out of the portal. McNeely, that's the one that concerns me a little bit more, because I really thought that Carolina had a shot, and it seemed like early on it was them and Louisville. Now people are saying that Carolina is in third place, not even really involved in this pursuit, and that Tennessee is now the team that has gotten involved. And you could say, well, maybe Tennessee, because of the success that they've had this season, they have the SEC money. It makes a lot of sense why they want to get involved. But it would feel like, Carolina you would want them to still be considered a serious contender, which it doesn't seem like that's what people are saying right now. So I would say, I'm mildly concerned about the fact that they're out of the running for Isaac McNeely. I thought that was one that really would have fit well, and you would think he'd be a guy that would want to stick in the ACC if he could, because he's had so much success in this conference. But, if he ends up at Tennessee, maybe it's just a thing where he's going to the SEC because it's the most competitive conference in the country, because they're willing to offer more money. But I think that's the other thing that is going to get Tar Heel fans frustrated, including, to a certain extent me, is if we have to see the number. If Carolina, if it's a number that we feel like Carolina should be able to stomach, then it's going to become more of a concern, because you're going to ask yourself, how much money does Carolina actually have, even though they are telling us that they have increased NIL funds. It'll be interesting to monitor that situation moving forward. But again, he hasn't committed anywhere, so you never really know how quickly things can turn on the transfer portal, or with transfer portal guys. We saw it with Harrison Ingram, where we thought that, Carolina had him at one point. Then we thought that Carolina was going to miss on him, and then he swung back in Carolina's favor. So I would say Carolina's just got to continue to be aggressive, do everything that they possibly can to try to get McNeely on campus and some of these other big names that are in the portal at the guard position, and just see what happens.
And I think it's also important to remember they're not going to land every guy that they contact, every guy that they recruit. Like they're gonna go after guys. They're going to pursue guys. They're going to offer guys not just a scholarship but a contract, and they're not going to come here. That's the reality of the situation. That's what happens in free agency at every pro sport, where you get involved with a guy and they choose to go somewhere else. The SEC, if he goes there, you're probably looking at it as more than anything as a financial reason. We know that Tennessee is one of those schools that they have committed money to football and basketball. They've got the funds to pay rosters in both sports to ensure that they continue to compete at the highest level. Louisville, the report is that they're going to have $10 million at their disposal to build a basketball roster. That would be the most money of any program in the sport, because most teams are around that 4 to maybe 6 million range at the top to fill out his basketball roster. If they've got $10 million at their disposal, they're going to be really hard to compete with moving forward. And so, I understand the frustration and the discouragement, but until he signs, then Carolina's still there.
Yep.
And, Carolina has a chance to, you would imagine, at least counter offer or match the offer. And we'll see where that goes, as his recruitment moves along. Dent, I think, was probably more of anything wanting to stay on the West Coast. You're going to play for a blue blood program, and you're going to play for a winner in Mick Cronin, who, may not like his current situation, but has proven that he can win at UCLA and win at ways that they just haven't really won since, John Wooden left Westwood back in the 1970s. One last piece of information we have to deliver to you guys before we do get out of here. This news coming down basically right as we got on here and started talking, but Carolina has been involved now with another guard in the transfer portal, Silas Demary Jr., the guard from Georgia, who averaged 13.5 points, 3.1 assists, and shot 37% from behind the three-point line. This, according to Andrew Jones and Tar Heel Illustrated. Those guys do a fantastic job covering the program. So another guard that Carolina is getting involved with, and this one is a local guy, having played at Millbrook High School, and then you're talking about academy schools, Liberty Heights and Combine. So this is a North Carolina native that, off the top of my head, I don't remember how involved Carolina was with him in his initial high school recruitment, but does have ties to the Carolinas, played at two of the more known academies in the state, and is a guy that has played at a high level for a Georgia team that just went to the NCAA tournament this past year. So was a member of the SEC all-freshman team as well. So initial thoughts here on Carolina getting involved with yet another guard, but this one a guard from a power conference program and a team that made the tournament this past season.
Yeah, I like this one. I really do. I think this is a guy that if you can't get Isaac McNeely, this is a really nice solution behind him. 13.5 a game, as you mentioned. Shot the ball well, but shot the ball a lot. 39%, really around 40% this year overall from the field. But the thing you love is how good he shot the ball from three. 37.4% this year. The highest, easily the highest of his career, a huge jump from his freshman season. And maybe that's the concern that some would have about him, would be the jump that he took from his freshman to sophomore year. Is he built to be a guy that takes another leap this year? I think he is. I think he was one of, if not the best player for most of the year for this Georgia team, and is a big part of why Georgia was where they were at. Him or Asa Newell, those two guys, kind of exchanged, games where they were the best player on the floor. But this guy, being a local guy, grew up, there were some people that were talking about him right after he entered the portal, apparently grew up a Tar Heel fan. So I think this would be special for him. And you just look at the way that he finished the season. I think that's what you have to like, is that He finished the season with 10 straight games of double-digit scoring. In the conference tournament, the lone game that they played and that they lost, he did have 24 for the Bulldogs, scored 15 in the tournament game for them, despite shooting just 3 of 14. Wasn't a great showing against Gonzaga, but then wasn't a great showing for anybody. I like how aggressive he is at getting to the rim. The thing about him is that he is a guy that is a scoring two-guard. That's why I say that he would be the perfect second option behind Isaac McNeely, because that is where he is going to play. Yes, he shares the basketball at a pretty high level for a guy out of that spot. I mean, average 3.1 assists, but he is not a guy that's controlling what you're doing offensively. So Carolina would still have to get a point guard, but I really think this is the type of scoring guard that Carolina is looking for. I mean, his effective field goal percentage, almost near 50% this year. That's something that you really like to see, a guy that's taking the right type of shots. And I think that he is going to be a guy that has a chance to take another significant step this season. So I would be on board for sure if Carolina wants to bring him in this offseason.
Yeah, I think this would be a perfect compliment to a guy that, let's say, Carolina brings in, with Nick Boyd, but you pair him with this guy in that backcourt. That's a nice complementary piece, a guy that can play off the ball and score the ball. You like the fact that he's from the SEC, from a program that just made the NCAA tournament. Mike White's, I think, one of the more underrated coaches, because it's not easy to win at a school like Georgia that, simply put, does not value basketball the way some of the other SEC programs have started to do so in the last couple of years. So, not necessarily Carolina. This just leads to tell you that they're going to be aggressive, looking to replace Cadeau and RJ Davis. They want to take the pressure off the incoming freshmen and not put them in roles that might be too big for them. And so they're going to exhaust all avenues trying to add a guard or multiple guards out of the portal. And that's what they are doing with how much they have shown interest in now with their 5th or 6th guard here early on this week. So with that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. In the meantime, we're going to encourage you to visit the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. An article about Noah Williamson is up on the website. An article about Nick Boyd is up on the website. When we get done recording, I'm going to go write about the Silas Demary Jr., the guard from Georgia, and Carolina being interested in him as well. So just like we're doing with the podcast, every transfer portal target is getting an article on the website. You want to make sure you're going there to stay up to date with the portal. Anthony has you covered with all things Carolina football. They're still pretty active recruiting as well. Spring practice is making its way through Chapel Hill, so he's got you covered on that front. We just want you to visit our website every single day, whether it's in the morning, afternoon, or evening, to make sure you're staying up to date with Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. At least 1 to 2 articles going up on the site each day covering both programs. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball off season. It's been a busy first week of the off season. You want to make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any editions of the podcast throughout the spring and summer. Well, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.